Hello learners, in today's session we will talk about Far from the Mendy Crowd and the literary elements in this session. The first one is genre, realist novel, Victorian novel, setting and context. Hardy's fiction region of Wessex located in the southwest of England. While Hardy invented a new name for the place he featured in his novel, many can be identified as actual locals. The setting for much of the novel is rural and also includes some of the scene in the towns. Narrator and point of view. The novel is narrated by a omniscient third-party narration with a distinction voice and a perspective, who sometimes interject to make a remark about the character and the world around them. The point of view alternate in a different sense, ranging from Bathsheba to Gabriel to Boldwood to Troy to Fanny. Tone and mood. The tone for much of the novel is thoughtful and reflective. The narrator uses the experience of specific character to draw broader inference about human experience. The tone can be affection toward many of the premier character, and this might be reflect in the narrator's adoption, a tenderly casting tone toward characters like Bathsheba, or pitying and sorrowful tone towards doomed a character like Fanny. The tone suggests that the figure of the narrator observes character making decision and mistake, and comments on them, perhaps with the aim of instruction the reader. Protagonist and antagonist. Both Bathsheba and Gabriel can be considered the protagonist, and the special attention paid to them as a character is part of what a single that they are ultimately meant to be together. Boldwood and Troy both function as antagonists. Major conflict. The major conflict of the novel revolve around whether or not Bathsheba and Gabriel will recognize that they are well suited to one another and would lead a happy life together. The conflict is certain through Bathsheba's stubbornness and ignorance about what type of a partner would actually suit her best, as well as the coincidence and bad luck that make Gabriel a less viable suitor after he loses his economic stability. Bollywood and Troy both further the conflict and function as antagonists by acting as alternative suitors who distract Bathsheba and compete with Gabriel for her hand in marriage. Climax. The climax of the novel occurs when Bathsheba, distraught at the news that Gabriel is going to stop working at the farm, shows her unhappiness at losing him, and this gives Gabriel the courage to propose again. This time she accepts him. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is used relatively heavily throughout the novel. Much of the novel plot revolves around characters who are either able to judge astutely and accurately anticipate future events, or who fail to see future consequences and have to learn difficult lessons as a result. Foreshadowing works to signal to a reader when a character either is not actually anticipated future consequence. For example, Gabriel's faithful help during the fire at Bathsheba's farm foreshadow that he will be consistent delight and careful. His willingness to come back and help Bathsheba after her sheep sicken themselves from eating clover foreshadows the loyalty and support he will show to Bathsheba, even when she makes bad decisions. On the other hand, the scene where Troy laughs with the other soldier about Fanny foreshadows that he does not have much respect for women and will not treat Fanny or Bathsheba well in future. Understand? Understatement. Understatement is sometimes used in the novel, especially to describe Gabriel's comment and reaction. Gabriel is a character who feels very deeply but does not often fully display his emotion. Sometimes these characteristics help him to be successful because he is a suitor and deliberate rather than impulsive, but it can also hurt him because it leads to Bathsheba often doubt whether he loves her or not. Some example of Gabriel's understatement include the scene where he and Bathsheba recognize each other after he helps put out the fire. He simply asks her whether she wants to hire a shepherd rather than trying to express the complex emotion raised by running into each other again. Toward the end of the novel, when Gabriel tells Bathsheba he is going to stop working at her farm, he simply says that he wants to try farming in California and does not discuss a emotion involved in leaving her. This understanding of the feeling led Bathsheba to mistakenly believe he does not love her. Illusion. Hardy used many illusions throughout the novel, particular to biblical stories and classical mythologies. Thus, illusions were expected to be readily understood by an educated Christian reader of the time and enrich the reading experience by encouraging the audience to draw connection between the novel and the other important texts. For example, when Bathsheba bursts into tears after Troy kisses her for the first time, Hardy writes that it had brought upon her a shock resulting as did that of Moses in harbor in liquid stream. Hardy alludes to biblical story in which Moses is leading a group of tired, anxious Israelites through the desert. God instructs to strike a rock on mountain harbor, and when he does so, it splits open and water pours out for the people to drink. The allusion therefore helps the reader to understand the vulnerability a danger Bathsheba is experiencing at his moment, at the way her tears are a way to relieve her complex feeling. Two other important illusions are contained in the name of one of the protagonists and in the title of the novel. Bathsheba, unusually named, would immediately bring to mind the biblical story of David and Bathsheba. In this story, a beautiful woman named Bathsheba attracts the attention of King David when he shows her bathing, and even though she was already married, he seduced her. Afterward, when Bathsheba became pregnant, in order to cover up the adultery, King David gave order to ensure her husband would be killed in battle so that he could marry her himself. The story of lust, depiction, and rivalry, each some of the major themes of the novel. The novel's title is an allusion to a line from Thomas Gray's poem Elegy written on country churchyard. This poem describes the speaker reflecting on the types of lives led by the humble country folk who now lie buried in a humble churchyard. The poet describes how far from the mending crowd's ignoble strife their sober wishes never learned to stray, implying that the rural inhabited were satisfied with the traditional time-honored life they lead, and Hardy used this illusion to signal the ruler focus of his novel. Imagery and paradox is not there. And if we see, these are the things, some important parts we are able to see there. And if we want to see some parallelism, what kind of parallel aquariums are there? So let's see. Because Bathsheba is caught by three different men, each of her suitor is parallel figure to the other. One clear example of parallelism is how each man responds differently to her rejecting him, and trying to end the relationship. Gabriel responds by accepting her answer and never bring the subject up again. He respects Bathsheba's boundaries even though he continues to go on loving her. Bollywood responds by continuing to pursue and nag her. He refused to give up, and even at inappropriate moments, such as when she learns of Troy's death, he remains obsessed with finding a way to get her to marry him. Troy restore to trickery and manipulation. When she comes to Bath, intending to end the relationship, he tells her about a woman who is more beautiful than she is. By provoking her jealous, he successfully coerces her into agreeing to marry him. So that is the parallelism, that how the three men, or that the people are responding, that we are able to see in Far From the Mending Crowd. So these are the some literary aspect, or that literary elements, how it's written in Far From the Mending Crowd, like history, some of the biblical response, some of the mythological connection we have seen. So this kind of qualities or the quantities are there, which we have seen. So that's discuss about here in this session. I hope so you